we're back, we're live, we're here at ThinkTech Hawaii, and this is Monday, and every 2 weeks with Gauri Khandekar in Brussels or wherever she might be, we do Midnight in Brussels. And we call it that because while it's noon here in Hawaii, it's 12 midnight in Brussels, and Gauri has stayed up for us, and we really appreciate that. Good evening, Gauri.
Hi, good evening, Jay. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure, as always.
We enjoy having you, and we know that you're getting more and more famous, and you still talk to us anyway, so we appreciate that a lot.
Come on.
We're talking about catching up with the Eurozone. Before we actually get started, then I just want to say that, Gauri, you probably don't know this, but our studio is moving. We're here in Suite 30 in Pioneer Plaza at the core of downtown Honolulu, and the landlord is relocating us to Suite 888. 8 is a very lucky number in Chinese. So we're moving there a week from today.
Fantastic, congratulations.
So when you come back for a show, Gauri, make sure to go to Suite 888, not Suite 30.
Yes, 888.
Okay, Gauri's with FRIDE, and I wanted to also, have our listeners understand what FRIDE is. All I know at the moment is it's a think tank with its headquarters in Madrid and one office in Brussels. And Gauri manages the Asian affairs aspect of FRIDE in Brussels. But tell us more about FRIDE, Gauri.
So we were born in Spain, and FRIDE, F-R-I-D-E, is an acronym, it's a Spanish acronym, so it's Fundación para los Palacio Internacional y el Diálogo Exterior, which means Foundation for International Relations and External Dialogue. So we shortened it to FRIDE.
Wonderful. Everything, is that Spanish you mentioned or French?
Yes, it was Spanish.
Okay.
We were founded by a Spanish philanthropist.
So does that mean you speak Spanish as well as English and Indian?
Yes, I do speak a bit of Spanish, but English, French, Hindi, Marathi, yes, and a bit of Spanish.
And you're in Brussels, so you must speak French. And what's the other language in that area?
Flemish.
Flemish. Do you speak Flemish?
Not at all. I think it's quite complicated.
I know, and it's a shrinking number of people are speaking it. But as I recall, there's a university in Brussels that speaks nothing but Flemish, right?
Yes, exactly, the VUB. But
Yeah.
now, even as with the French, it's getting internationalized. So they do have courses in English, and they're all starting to get on the bandwagon of globalization and speak English.
Boy, it's really around us, and catching up. We have a news piece we do every day, every weekday, with Donna Blanchard. We call it the ThinkTech Daily News, and she's able to report on things just as quickly as the global media is able to report. So if you ever have a chance, watch ThinkTech Daily News on our website, thinktechhawaii.com, or youtube.com/thinktechhawaii, and you will see that we are very current on news. And part of being current on news is talking with you, Gauri, catching up with you on the Eurozone. So let's talk about what's happening. And I guess what is mostly in the news about Europe here these days is the migrant problem from North Africa to Italy. What's going on?
Yes, actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that that's on your news there, because I was in India recently, and most of the Indians, they literally hardly ever talk about the EU. But now we're also talking about the migrant crisis, and some of the think tankers were really angry about what was happening, So it's funny enough what gets reported outside of the EU. Well, there's a big crisis going on in the Mediterranean, as everyone knows. You have boats of migrants coming over. Some of them even drown in the seas, and that's been around 1,800 this year who have died, who have perished on the sea. And they do come to mainly Italy and Greece. Now, these are countries that are undergoing severe strain of the financial crisis. but they're also quite active when it comes to rescuing the migrants and taking them ashore. But you know, Jay, the thing in the EU is that there's little burden sharing. So while Greece and Italy get thousands of migrants, of course they're not doing as much as maybe countries in the Middle East like Jordan, perhaps. But still, I mean, considerably, they are doing quite a bit. Uh, given the years of migration that has been persistent, and other EU countries, even though there is freedom of movement of labor, capital, services, there is less burden sharing across Europe in terms of the migrants. So this is one of the main issues. And the second issue is now what to do with it, you know. And here we have the new decision that was just taken, that the EU would launch a mission to destroy the boats, not with the people in it, but while they're at shore, because this is quite a lucrative business.
So what's the upshot on that? Is a decision been made? Is it
Yes.
agreed among everyone involved that the boats can or should be destroyed?
Yes, actually, the foreign policy chief just today, she was saying that the boats will be destroyed. There will be a mission launched by even around mid-June to tackle this migrant crisis, and they will destroy these boats off the Libyan coast. Um, so yeah, there will be a mission launched.
Well, it raises some questions for me. I heard on National Public Radio this morning that the Libyans did not, that the EU sees this as a partnership with Libya, but the Libyans, and I guess it was the ambassador to the United Nations was articulating this position. He didn't see it the same way. And he thought before that happens, before there'd be a partnership, such as the partnership that would allow EU forces to come ashore in Libya and destroy boats. Libya wanted certain concessions from the EU, and they wanted to have more authority in the Mediterranean, which they didn't feel they had enough authority right now. So it's, as far as the Libyans are concerned, and probably the United Nations, it's not exactly settled who can do what and where.
Yes.
What strikes me though is that this whole affair of the boat people, I use that term with reference to what happened in Vietnam.
Yeah.
The boat people is only the beginning of a wave of migration away from North Africa and the Middle East. And I think we've seen it increasing. At least we've seen the desire to get away increasing, and in all likelihood we'll continue to see it increasing, whether they destroy some boats or not. And I wonder what that means. Assume with me for a moment that it will increase, and that thousands upon thousands of migrants will find their way to abandoned, quiet beaches, rocky shores, who knows where, on the northern side of the Mediterranean, and find their way into Europe. What's the reaction in Europe? What will happen to Europe if that comes to pass?
Yeah, very interesting question, Jay. I honestly think that the Europeans are not really ready to have an influx of migrants, and this has become a political issue. It's become a mainstream political issue. Germany is one of the countries that receives the largest number of immigrants, and so migrants, and as well as Sweden, for instance, and the political opinion in the country is really turning against more migrants coming over, and that they should do much less in a way. I mean, that's the populist position. The trouble also is because, Libya is not a really strong state at the moment, and it's being flooded by people from across North Africa and the Middle East, but also by ISIS militants. Um, and that's a danger because you don't know who's coming aboard those
Yes.
ships. So recently, there was a story that I also read in the media here that on one of the ships, uh, there were Muslims praying, and there were few Christians, and the Muslims threw the Christians overboard, and because they weren't praying with them. Sorry. So, there's a trouble that you cannot identify who is what, and more recently, just yesterday, I saw pictures on the media where some of these radicalists or migrants, you couldn't say their identity, but they were holding up notes with the ISIS flag and the symbol in front of monuments in Italy, saying it will be ground zero soon.
Well, if they can get ashore without any, immigration process, and without the permission or approval of the governments of the countries that they go to, then ISIS can be in southern Europe through these migrant boats anytime. That's really threatening to Europe.
Yeah, well, that's what's happening in a way. Libya is becoming one of ISIS's strongholds in a way. I mean, ISIS has set foot in Libya, and they're expanding, and I mean, they do have access to these boats. You don't know. I mean, it's not printed on their heads, that they're ISIS. They have a very cached identity, and of course they could be. That's a very real possibility,
Yeah.
So it's quite dangerous.
It is quite dangerous, and if I were the European authorities, I would be very concerned about it. Other thing I heard this week was that from England alone, some 700 kids had left to join ISIS, and only a small fraction of them less than half, I'll say, had come back to England after spending time with ISIS there. So there's, it goes for the proposition that borders are melting away, which is a proposition that ISIS has adopted and accelerated. Borders are melting away. Even the border of the Mediterranean is melting away. And this, if you're an aggressive state like ISIS, this works in your favor. And so I think Europe is at great risk, having people make the trip, both going south and now coming north. And I think it is a threat to the stability of every country in the Eurozone.
You are very correct, Jay. One of the dangers is the returning fighters, There are so many that have gone to train with ISIS, they've gone to fight with ISIS, the jihadi brides even.
Yeah.
And some want to come back now. And that's tough, because you don't know with what intention they're coming back now, what crimes they've committed. So it's dangerous to have them back. And some countries are indeed putting in place laws that would say that they can't come back anymore once they quit and they've committed crimes abroad. And that is of course that is dangerous to have trained, seasoned militants amongst the population. I actually remember we had spoken about the jihadi brides issue a few shows back, and I was thinking, why do they go there? It's because mainly these young, and they're mainly 16-year-old girls. They tend to idolize these fighters, and for them, fighting for the cause that they are fighting for, of Islam, and most of these young girls tend to see them as their heroes. So it's a matter of perspective, and it's the same thing with radicalized young males and why they're going there. That is very difficult to change in Europe itself, in these countries, and in the mindset of how they perceive politics happening abroad, how they perceive political Islam, and that really is tough to change.
Well, like that law that potentially would stop them from coming back. That's an interesting law, and hard to enforce anyway. It strikes me there must be other reaction in Europe by the governments and by the conservatives who would say, really, we don't want to be involved in this. We don't want them coming to our country. We don't want the threat of these ISIS returnees. We're going to take affirmative steps to try to hold them at the border. Reinforce the border. Go the other way from the process of opening the borders. We want to try to close. Do you see that? Do you hear that? Is the Eurozone trying to protect itself by and people in the Eurozone reacting to this in-migration?
Specifically on the returning jihadi fighters, you don't see it mainly amongst the public. That's not a topic that's discussed widely here because, the one thing that's great about the EU is they do maintain an air of peace and prosperity, even though its neighborhood is crumbling. So you don't have people really on the streets discussing this. It's more day-to-day business and, what's happening with the economy or whatever. Yeah. In the media, you do see it, and you do have the politicians calling for tougher laws on returning fighters. The thing is that it's also a new issue here, so they are now trying to figure out what to do because they've never faced this before. Except for the war on terror.
Well, you and I will have to put this out as a continuing thread, Gauri. We have to follow it as it evolves because I think it will evolve. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, I'd like to check out with you what's happening with ISIS in Iraq and how people in the Eurozone feel about that. It's Gauri Khandekar in FRIDE. It's her organization. And that's in Brussels. We call the show Midnight in Brussels, and we're catching up with Gauri on the Eurozone. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen. I host Likable Science on ThinkTech Hawaii, and I do this because I care about science literacy in Hawaii. I want to spread the understanding that science is a vital and interesting part of everyone's life. I want to make sure the broadest possible spectrum of people understand the beauty and the value of science and realize that science plays out each and every day of their lives. I want you to understand that science is fun. So we bring onto this show each week guests who are scientists, from astronomers to zoologists, and we talk about what they do and how they do it. But most importantly, we talk about why you should care about their work, why you should see that their work has value and impact on your life. So I hope you'll join us Fridays, 1 p.m. here on ThinkTech Hawaii. You can watch us via live stream. You can watch us recorded on Olelo, and you can see us each week. We hope you'll join us.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here in Honolulu with Gauri Khandekar, who joins us from Brussels at midnight. By Skype. We're delighted to have her every 2 weeks so we can catch up with things in Europe. So, Gauri, I wanted to move to the Middle East itself now, and perhaps the source of all these people trying to migrate across the Mediterranean is ultimately ISIS. ISIS could be the motivating feature, directly or indirectly, for all these people coming across on those boats. But let's talk about ISIS for a minute. ISIS took today, I guess it was, or yesterday, Ramadi, which is not too far from Baghdad. And the Iraqi soldiers ran away and left them weapons and vehicles and what have you. It was an embarrassment at the least. And Secretary of State Kerry was trying to make light of it, but I think it has some bad implications. What do the people in Europe think about what happened?
Well, I think there's just too much to deal with here in Europe. So the ISIS issue continues in the background. You see, it's not seen as an immediate threat. what is still seen as immediate external threats are now the migrant crisis and Russia still. So Russia still forms one of the main threats here. In terms of ISIS, um, I think it's also been overshadowed by the Saudi Arabian strikes, yeah?
Yes.
Um, but there's not been much kind of debate in public. Like just now, I was also today I was looking at what's happening in European media, and you don't see much of ISIS or like or what's the EU take on ISIS. So yeah, there's quite little going on inside Europe in terms of reaction to ISIS.
Well, not that it's directly related, but everything in the world seems to be connected these days, with the Middle East, directly or indirectly with ISIS. I mean, I saw that the Pope is trying to fashion a special relationship with the Palestinians.
Yeah.
And the Israelis are not too happy about that. I wonder, what you know about that and how Europe feels about that, in terms of the way Europe and the Pope and the Catholic Church deal with Palestine.
Yeah, well, it was quite surprising here. And I think it goes in a way to kind of make peace, or the Pope's attempt to make peace between the Muslims, and one of the reasons why they've been the motivating factor here to carry out attacks, because the Muslims in Palestine largely and around the world actually, those who are radicalized, Palestine is used as a huge motivating factor, and they blame the West, which is Europe and the US in particular, and so. It's long been said in Europe, they've been speaking about it, that they should help solve this Palestine crisis, and that has been really reinforced since the terrorist attacks have been taking place. Now the Pope's move to recognize the state of Palestine, well, it's also kind of welcomed around some countries, those who have already said they would recognize Palestine, but it's still seen as quite a political development on part of the Pope, because this Pope has been quite politically active.
Yes.
Especially against the last Pope.
Yes, that's true. He's taking steps that no Pope in recent time has taken. And this is an interesting one, especially at a time when things are so destabilized. I mean, it seems like what's happening there has an effect everywhere. For example, the boats in the Mediterranean. You turn east and you find that there are also refugees in Malaysia, coming from Malaysia, and their boats are also sinking. It's like the people in Malaysia are watching what happens in the Mediterranean and doing the same thing. Are you following that?
I have been looking at it actually. They've not yet sunk the boats around here in Europe, and if they do it, they would literally like go to where the boats are parked when there's nobody on the boats and then sink them, right?
Yes.
What's doing in Indonesia and in Malaysia at the moment is like they're not allowing the migrants on land at all. So while the Europeans go out to rescue those people that have come across, that if they get into trouble, the Indonesians and the Malaysians are definitely not doing that. Australia doesn't even allow the migrants to set foot on its territory,
Mm-hmm.
And so many people are literally dying on the seas there, even around Thailand. And I think comparatively, the US doing a much better job. I mean, what's happening in the Southeast Asian countries is really atrocious, I would say, because the migrants are left on ships, for a long, long time without food or access to like sanitary facilities, and they're literally allowed to left drowning. And some of the fishermen who take pity on these migrants are not allowed to help them in a way. I mean, they say the armed forces have spoken to the fishermen and said that okay, you can take them on your vessels if you see them in the water, but don't get them on land because that would be illegal.
Well, that's a tougher position than what happens in Europe for sure.
Yeah.
Let's turn for a minute, Gauri, to England. The elections in the UK. That was a remarkable election, was it not? And it reflects maybe some of the problems we've been talking about and the relationship of England with the rest of Europe. Can you talk about Cameron's election?
Definitely. Well, it was a surprise election here. Nobody knew that nobody would expected the Conservative Party, who are also called the Tories, to win the election completely. Now, the previous government has been a coalition between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats led by Nick Clegg. Nick Clegg has been the Deputy Prime Minister, and David Cameron of the Conservative Party, of course, who everybody knows has been the Prime Minister. There were also two parties. Now, Labour has been led by Ed Miliband, and they were really campaigning hard. Most people thought that it would be a very tough situation with power sharing and different arrangements. But surprisingly, the Conservatives won, the Lib Dems, the Liberal Democrats lost out, Labour didn't win as much, but even more shockingly, the Scottish Nationalist Party won 69 seats. And that's huge, you know, they've made huge inroads.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, UKIP, which is quite a right party, a far-right party, they did not win many seats. They won one seat, I believe.
Well, the times they are changing. So what do you think this reflects in terms of the change in public opinion in the UK?
Well, I honestly think, I mean, there are contrasting claims, right? Nobody knows exactly why the Conservatives won, because almost every the poll, you know, the pre-election poll predicted it to be a hung parliament, to be a coalition, but nobody predicted that it would be a Conservative victory. At the end of it, I really think that it's more for continuity, more about the EU, because what Cameron had promised was a referendum on the EU, on the UK's membership to the EU, and most of the UK is really Eurosceptic, which is they're not too happy with the EU. They don't want to be, you know, they're not too excited about the EU, and so they would like to have a referendum. On the extreme right wing, you see the UKIP party, which says that they want out of the EU. And
Yeah, that's. Let me take a quick break with you, Gauri. But we come back. I'd like to explore that, and I'd like to, you know, connect that with the public opinion that was demonstrated in Scotland recently, when they had a similar kind of sort of departure vote. That's Gauri Khandekar. She's with FRIDE, which is a think tank in Europe, in Madrid and Brussels. She handles Asian affairs in Brussels. We're catching up with her about Europe, events in Europe here on midnight in Brussels, and we'll keep her up just a little longer for that purpose. We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Hunter Hevlin, host of Sustainable Hawaii here at ThinkTech Hawaii. You can tune in every week on Thursday at 2 p.m. to see interviews with sustainability professionals from around the state and even further abroad, learning about activities with water management, food security, waste management, and a whole host of other fascinating opportunities to get engaged with making a greener island. So if you're interested in making the transition from consuming individuals to communities of producers, check us out every Thursday.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon, and on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Gauri Khandekar in FRIDE in Brussels. We're calling this Midnight in Brussels, catching up on the developments in Europe. So, so you had an experience. Oh yeah, before we get to that, so this reflects a kind of change of opinion in Britain, that there's a lot of people in Britain, as reflected in the recent elections in UK, who don't particularly want to be that close to Europe. What is the current public opinion as reflected in the election, and what are people saying about it?
Basically, the UK has never been very much pro-Europe, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've never been pro-EU. They think, and most of the UK media as well, they flare it up. They think that the EU is stealing powers from the UK. So while a number of countries in the EU have the euro currency, the UK has kept its own pound. And the same thing when it comes to, for example, Schengen visa, yeah, because the EU is largely composed of the majority of countries who allow free movement of people, tourists, but the UK has kept its borders up.
Well, it probably feels pretty good about that now, given the migrant boats from North Africa.
Exactly, and that's one of the issues that UK does not want to compromise on, especially on the migrants issue. So the UK really wants to keep its identity. The people of the UK, most of them are not really against the EU, and if there were a referendum, they would probably vote to be in the EU because there are, of course, a lot of gains. But they still feel that the UK should take back some powers from the EU.
Like what?
For instance, on migration, on reforms of the banking sector, because the EU makes all these laws, and after the crisis especially, they've become quite strong in how to regulate the banking sector. Mm-hmm. The UK, I must mention, is one of the is the best when it comes to implementing EU regulation or putting it into its own law, because all countries have to do it in the EU, but the UK is best at doing it.
I suspect that. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, yeah. No, please.
I suspect that the Greek financial problems are also something that the UK does not want to be involved with. They don't want to have the risk of having to pay for Greece's problems, or other countries in Europe, and they don't want to get sucked into a situation where they have to pay for the debts of some other country, and that must be driving this public opinion also, eh?
Definitely. I mean, that's one of the issues. The main country that's really involved in really funding Greece's recovery is actually Germany, and excuse me. And most of the Germans are really against it. They don't want to keep on funding Greece, but the government does see it imperative to have a Greek recovery.
Yeah.
Now, in the UK as well. I mean, economy is just one issue. It really goes down to every little piece of legislation. Then in one of the populist magazines called Daily Mail, you see articles on how the EU is changing rights of the British to own high voltage vacuum cleaners. So yeah, it's right down to that even.
You know, the whole thing about separating or maintaining and increasing the separation with Europe reminds me of what happened in Scotland only a couple of months ago, where the Scots were able to get, the issue on the ballot of whether they should secede from the UK. And although ultimately cooler heads prevailed and they did not vote, a majority of them didn't vote to secede from the UK, a lot of discussion, a lot of people did vote to secede. And in fact, it changed politics in Scotland vis-a-vis the UK. So is this a new wind of independence blowing in UK or in Europe?
Well, the Scots made the right decision when they chose not to separate from the UK.
Mm-hmm.
One of the main reasons behind that is Scotland would have lost its membership of the EU, right? It wouldn't automatically become a member of the EU. And the Scots are quite pro-European Union. Now, if the Scots would have voted against UK membership, and then they would have applied for the EU membership, there would have definitely been countries like Spain or Greece who would have shut down their membership application to the EU. So in that sense, the EU membership was one. Now the Scots are trying to impose themselves to impose their identity in British politics because of the big turnout, in the elections.
Yes.
But that said, there is not going to be a large degree of independence or that Scotland would gain because of this. I mean, already the question of a new referendum is out, and they won't get it soon.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, Scotland does not use most of its freedom or independence that it has, and even the budget. It hardly, it's always got like £500 million pounds left over, So, so I think it's funny enough, but it's more a question of pride and honor for them than really trying to make changes.
Right, and that's different from the way the UK sees its relationship with the EU.
Yes.
So let me go to the last part of our discussion, and that's looking east. The first thing is, I understand that you had a TV interview by Skype with the network in Singapore, and something about how they heard that you had been appearing on ThinkTech Hawaii by Skype, so they called you and brought you into a discussion of the elections in UK by Skype in Singapore to fill in the people there. What happened?
Yeah, definitely. That was very interesting. So Channel News Asia had contacted me, and it was to comment on the UK elections, and it was a very interesting experience. Again, I've been on the show before last year.
Yes.
But that was very briefly. It's very nice that they do it by Skype. I mean, like ThinkTech Hawaii, it's quite I think a revolutionary way in which to involve other people around the globe. And your radio show is quite a leader in this sense, I would say,
Thank you for that.
Yeah. So it was wonderful, and one of the issues that they were wondering about is exactly the migration crisis and what the UK feels about it, and how this has impacted the elections, and how the UK would change its immigration policy as well.
So you see, you become interesting to them for many of the same reasons you're interesting to us, because you're sort of in the center of everything. You know what's going on in India and Asia. You know what's going on in the UK. You know how people in Europe are feeling about it. You are a woman for all seasons, Gauri. But let me ask.
People.
Let me ask my last question. That is, it appears that Mr. Modi is going to China, or is in China now. What is the diplomatic and strategic background of a trip by Modi to Xi Jinping?
Well, he just finished today. It was a very quick trip, it was just 3 days. He finished the trip, and it was a great trip. They signed 26 accords worth $22 billion. Huge, and mainly focused on the infrastructure sector. What is really the great takeaway is the changing nature of the Indo-China relationship, because you have antagonism on the one hand because of mistrust, the territorial disputes, and Pakistan's close relationship with China. On the other hand, you have the positives, which is growing trade relations, China's growing investments in India, and cooperation at the multilateral level, especially with the BRICS forum. So the Indian and the Chinese are now building on these positives and putting all the bad feelings on the back burner. And you could see this really change with when Modi became prime minister. Not only did Modi invite President Xi to his hometown, Ahmedabad, which is a really, I think it's unprecedented that a state visit begins in a city outside Delhi. And now President Xi returned the welcome, and Modi traveled first to Xi's hometown. So I think this is quite a display of bonhomie and how they say it, a bromance. And it's quite
Brahman.
fun.
Brahman.
Yeah. The other thing which came across today and which caught my eye is this selfie, a selfie that Prime Minister Modi took with Premier Lee. And he basically put it on Twitter saying, "It's selfie time. Thank you, Premier Lee."
Well, how do you think this affects India's very warm relationship with the U.S.? I mean, has anybody said that this might affect it one way or the other?
Yeah, I honestly don't think so. What India is doing now, and India's foreign policy is changing. And this is actually what one of the chapters of my new book, how India's foreign policy is changing.
Mm-hmm.
So India, which has traditionally had this non-aligned policy, is now beginning to engage with all the major powers of this emerging multipolar world order. And China is one of them. And just as the US engages with China, and it also engages with Japan, India is doing the same thing, right? This does definitely not affect the friendship and really, as you mentioned, the warm relation that India shares with the US. It's more of a transactional relationship and an engagement, rather.
Mm-hmm.
And it also does not affect, for instance, India's relationship with Japan, Japan is, for instance, the largest ODA, overseas development donor to India. And it is really not really, I don't think this transactional relationship would trump values, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like things are really going well under Narendra Modi. Good for him. He's gonna do some history here, and we'll do it alongside with your help. And now your book, is that on Amazon? Can I get that book on Amazon? How do I get your book?
Thank you, Jay. It will be out at the end of this month. I'll definitely communicate it with you.
Okay. That's Gauri Khandekar of FRIDE, midnight in Brussels. We catch her at midnight in Brussels, and it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning. Thank you so much, Gauri. We really love to have these discussions with you. We'll have another one in 2 weeks from now, okay?
Thank you very much, Jay. I look forward to it.
Aloha.
Have a nice day.
You too.